You're being played. Right now, in every conversation you think you're controlling, every negotiation you believe you're winning, every relationship where you assume there's mutual respect, you're not participating. You're being managed. And the worst part? You don't even know what position you're playing from. You think you're a knight. You're a pawn. You think you're negotiating. You're being positioned. I'm going to show you something in the next 20 minutes that most people will reject immediately. Not because it's wrong, because it's uncomfortable, because it reveals what they've been doing to themselves their entire lives. Here's your first decision point. If you're looking for validation, close this video. If you need someone to tell you you're doing fine, that your instincts are good, that people are mostly fair, you're in the wrong place. This isn't therapy. This isn't a pep talk. This is a dissection. What I'm about to give you is irreversible. Once you see the mechanics of how power actually moves between people, you can't return to the fantasy that effort equals respect or that being good creates safety. You'll see every interaction as a positioning game, every silence as a power move, every compliment as a potential trap. Most people should stop watching now. Still here. Then you've made a choice. You've admitted something to yourself. That you're tired of losing exchanges you didn't know were competitions. That you've been outmaneuvered by people you thought were beneath you. That somewhere, deep in your chest, you know you've been operating from a position of weakness and calling it virtue. Good. That's the crack. That's where we start. Let me tell you what I see when I look at how most people move through the world. They explain themselves constantly. They justify their decisions to people who have no authority over them. They apologize for taking up space. They ask permission through tonality, even when they're technically in charge. They fill silences because they're afraid of what those silences mean. They laugh at jokes that aren't funny to prove they're easygoing. They agree with positions they don't hold to avoid micro-conflict. This is what submission looks like in a civilization that pretends it abolished hierarchy. You weren't taught this. You were taught the opposite. That communication is about clarity, that relationships are about openness, that leadership is about serving others. These aren't lies exactly. They're just the story told to people who will never hold power. It keeps you harmless. It keeps you useful. It keeps you in position. Machiavelli understood something that modern psychology has spent decades trying to obscure. Humans are hierarchical animals, playing a status game they've been taught to deny exists. Every interaction has a power component. Every relationship has a dominant frame. Every conversation is a negotiation over whose reality gets to be consensus reality. The people winning this game, they know they're playing. You thought showing up with good intentions was enough. It's not. You're bleeding status every time you volunteer an explanation. Watch what you do. Someone asks why you made a decision. You immediately construct a narrative that justifies your thinking. You walk them through your reasoning. You prove you're rational. You demonstrate you considered their perspective. You just repositioned yourself beneath them. The moment you explain yourself to someone who has no structural authority over you, you've given them psychological authority. You've made them the judge. You've made yourself the defendant. And now their approval matters. Now their understanding matters. Now you're waiting to see if your explanation was sufficient. Kings don't explain. They declare. This doesn't mean you never provide context. It means you never explain from a defensive position. There's a difference between sharing your reasoning and seeking permission through explanation. One is a gift. One is a submission. Most people can't feel this difference because they've been explaining themselves since childhood. Every decision questioned, every choice requiring justification, every action needing parental approval. You were trained to seek external validation before proceeding. That training didn't stop at 18. You just transferred it to bosses, partners, friends, strangers on the internet. Here's your correction. When someone asks you why you did something, pause. Feel the impulse to explain. Feel how automatic it is. Then ask yourself, does this person have actual authority over this domain of my life? If the answer is no, you have three options. 1. Ignore the question entirely and continue. 2. Redirect with a question that forces them to explain their position. 3. Give a statement so simple it closes the loop. It was the right move. I don't discuss that. Because I decided to. No elaboration. No defense. No appeal to their judgment. You'll notice something immediately. Most people will accept this. They'll recalibrate. Because you just set a boundary they didn't know was available. The ones who push, they're not confused. They're testing. And every additional word you give them is confirmation that they can extract compliance through pressure. Stop feeding that loop. You argue with people you think are your equals. You withdraw from people you've placed beneath you. Notice what you do when someone disrespects you. You engage. You explain why they're wrong. You defend your position. You try to make them see. You invest energy in changing their mind, correcting their behavior, winning the argument. You just told them they matter. Machiavelli knew that attention is the currency of the powerless. When you argue, you're saying, your opinion of me is negotiable, and I'm here to negotiate it. When you withdraw, you're saying, you no longer exist in my consideration. One of these positions is a king. One is a courtier. Here's what most people don't understand. Bad behavior repeated is bad behavior permitted. If someone crosses a boundary and you respond with words, you've taught them that words are the consequence. And words are cheap. Words are infinite. You can produce them forever, which means they can keep extracting them from you forever. Withdrawal is expensive. Withdrawal is finite. Withdrawal says you had access to something valuable and you just lost it. This requires you to believe you are the scarce resource in the interaction. Most people don't. Most people believe other people are the scarce resource, which is why they chase, explain, repair, convince. They're operating from a mindset of scarcity. If I lose this person, I lose access to value. But if you're the value, the calculation reverses entirely. When someone violates your boundaries, disrespects your time, or acts entitled to your energy, you don't fight. You don't correct. You fade. You become unavailable. You reduce responsiveness. You remove the resource they were taking for granted. No explanation, no dramatic exit, no announcement. Just quiet, permanent recalibration of their access level. You'll know this worked when they start re-engaging with deference they didn't have before. They'll test if you're still available. They'll offer value they didn't offer before. They'll recalibrate their behavior because they just felt the cost of losing position. If they don't, you've just identified someone who never valued you. They valued what you were willing to provide while asking nothing in return. These people don't deserve a confrontation. They deserve silence. And silence is the most violent response available to you. You think people respect kindness. They respect competence. You think people value openness. They value results. You think building rapport creates loyalty. Competence creates loyalty. Everything else is decoration. Here's what happens in reality. The person who solves the problem gets the power. The person who delivers gets the authority. The person who executes gets the respect. Not the person who tries hard. Not the person who means well. Not the person who communicates beautifully about why they failed. Machiavelli wrote for rulers who lived in a world where incompetence meant death, not career setbacks, not hurt feelings, death, cities burned, families murdered, territories lost. In that environment, you learn very quickly that intentions are irrelevant and only outcomes are scored. You live in a softer world, so you've been allowed to believe effort matters. It doesn't. Effort is what you give yourself credit for when you failed to produce the result. Here's your test. When was the last time you were respected for something you tried hard at, but failed? Never. When was the last time you were respected for something you succeeded at effortlessly? Always. People don't reward your struggle. They reward your output. This is why the hardest working person in the room is often not the most powerful. They're busy. They're overwhelmed. They're reactive. The most powerful person is the one who produces results from a position of calm. They make it look easy. They make it look inevitable. They make it look like they're operating from a different level of capability. And they might be. Or they might just understand that visible struggle is visible weakness. You need to become uncomfortably good at something. Not good enough, not trying your best. Uncomfortably good. So good that people feel the gap between their capability and yours. So good that you become difficult to replace. So good that your presence shifts the outcome of projects, teams, negotiations. This is not about arrogance. This is about leverage. The person who can walk away from the table and leave a hole is the person who sets the terms. The person who can be replaced has no terms to set. Stop trying to be liked. Start trying to be necessary. You're leaking power through your face. Every reaction, every visible frustration, every moment of surprise, every expression of approval. You think you're being authentic. You're being readable. And readable means controllable. The person who controls their emotional display controls the frame of the interaction. The person who reacts emotionally is being controlled by the frame. Watch what happens in negotiations. Watch what happens in confrontations. The person who stays calm isn't the person who doesn't feel. They're the person who has decided their feelings are not information the other party deserves to have. Because your emotions are data. When you show anger, you've told them where your boundary is. When you show excitement, you've told them what you value. When you show fear, you've told them what leverage to use. When you show approval too easily, you've told them the bar is low. Machiavelli advised rulers to be like the fox and the lion. The lion is force. The fox is cunning. But both share one trait. You never know what they're actually thinking until it's too late to respond. This doesn't mean you become a robot. It means you treat emotional expression as a tool, not a reflex. You show anger when you want to set a hard boundary. You show warmth when you want to reward behavior. You show approval when someone has earned position, but you never leak emotion unintentionally. Most people are the opposite. They suppress when they should express and express when they should suppress. They stay quiet when someone needs to be corrected. Then they explode 3 weeks later when the stakes are low and the context is gone. They give praise constantly for average performance, then wonder why excellence isn't produced. You need to reverse this. Become unreadable by default. Let people wonder what you think. Let them work to earn visible approval. Let them feel uncertain about where they stand. This creates a gap. And in that gap, they will self-correct, try harder, invest more, respect you more. Because humans are status-seeking animals, and we need to know where we stand in the hierarchy. When you make that information scarce, you become valuable. When you give it away for free, you become background. Your face is a broadcast. Control the signal. You're still waiting for apologies that will never come. You're still trying to make people understand what they did wrong. You're still having imaginary conversations where they finally see your side. You're still carrying emotional debts from people who have already moved on. This is the psychology of the powerless. Closure is not something other people give you. It's something you take by deciding their chapter is over. You don't need their understanding. You don't need their acknowledgement. You don't need the conversation where everything gets resolved, and you both walk away with mutual respect. That's a fantasy. That's what people who avoid conflict tell themselves to justify re-engaging with people who have already shown you who they are. Machiavelli understood that most people are not interested in truth. They're interested in the version of events that protects their self-image. If acknowledging what they did to you damages that self-image, they will never acknowledge it. They will rewrite history. They will reframe you as the problem. They will tell a story where they were justified, reasonable, and you were difficult, emotional, unreasonable. You cannot argue someone out of a narrative they need to believe about themselves, so stop trying. Here's what seeking closure actually does. It gives them another opportunity to disappoint you. It reopens a wound you were healing from. It puts you back in the position of needing something from someone who has already demonstrated they won't give it. You're not seeking closure. You're seeking validation. You want them to confirm that you were right to feel hurt. You want them to admit they were wrong. You want the satisfaction of hearing them say it. You will not get this. And even if you do, it won't feel the way you think it will, because the apology you want requires them to be a different person than the person who hurt you in the first place. Your correction. Close it yourself. Unilaterally, decide the story is over. Decide they no longer have a role. Decide their opinion of events is irrelevant to your movement forward. This is not forgiveness. This is amputation. You cut off the limb that's infected so the rest of the body survives. You don't have a conversation with the limb about why it got infected. You don't negotiate with it. You remove it and move on. People who owe you nothing will give you nothing. Stop asking. You're too available. You respond too quickly. You're too flexible with your time. You're too willing to accommodate. You say yes too easily. You rearrange your schedule for people who wouldn't rearrange theirs for you. And you wonder why you're not valued. Scarcity is the foundation of value. This is true for resources, for opportunities, and for people. The moment something becomes abundant, it becomes worthless. The moment you become infinitely available, you become infinitely replaceable. Most people are operating from a strategy of availability. They think being helpful, being responsive, being easy to work with will create value. It doesn't. It creates dependency in you and entitlement in them. Watch what people actually value. They value what's difficult to access. They value what requires effort to obtain. They value what other people want but can't easily get. This is true in markets, in relationships, in career positioning, in every domain where status is negotiated. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must be loved or feared, but never despised. And the fastest way to be despised is to be common, to be predictable, to be accessible without cost. You need to become expensive to access, not in money, in time, in attention, in energy. This doesn't mean you become arbitrarily difficult. It means you become selectively available. You reserve your best resources for people and situations that meet a standard. Everyone else gets a reduced version of you. Here's how you do this. Stop responding immediately to messages. Build in delay. Not to play games. To train people that your time operates on your schedule, not theirs. Stop saying yes to invitations that don't serve you. Your presence is the gift. Stop giving it to people who don't value it. Stop being so understanding when people waste your time. Stop being flexible when people are inflexible with you. Stop volunteering your expertise to people who wouldn't pay for it. Create friction. Create barriers. Create standards for access. You'll lose people. Good. The people you lose were never valuing you properly in the first place. They were valuing your availability. And availability is not a competitive advantage. What remains after you create scarcity? People who actually value what you offer. People who invest effort to maintain access. People who treat your time as the limited resource it is. This is the shift from servant to king. Kings are not available to everyone. They grant audiences. And audiences are earned. Start acting like access to you is a privilege, and people will start treating it like one. Every conversation is a battle over whose reality becomes consensus reality. You're losing this battle constantly, and you don't even know you're fighting. Watch what happens when someone accuses you of something. Your immediate response is to defend against the accusation. You accept their frame. You accept that you're now the defendant and they're the judge. You try to prove you're not what they said you are. You just lost. The moment you defend, you've agreed to play the game on their terms. You've agreed that their accusation deserves a response. You've agreed that their judgment matters. You've handed them the frame, and now you're operating inside it. Frame control is the art of determining what the interaction is about. The person who sets the frame sets the terms. The person who accepts the frame is being led. Machiavelli understood that perception creates reality in human systems. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It matters what people believe happened. It matters whose version of events becomes the official narrative. The ruler who controls the narrative controls the kingdom. You need to stop accepting frames other people hand you. Someone says you're being defensive. The weak response is to defend yourself against being defensive. The strong response is to reframe entirely. You're uncomfortable with my boundary. Now they're defending. Someone says you're arrogant. The weak response is to prove you're humble. The strong response is, you're confusing confidence with arrogance because you're not used to people who don't apologize for competence. Frame shifted. Someone says you've changed. The weak response is to explain why you haven't changed. The strong response is, I have, and that's not your concern. Frame rejected. You see the pattern. You never defend. You redirect. You reframe. You force them to defend their position instead of you defending yours. This requires you to stop caring about being misunderstood. Most people would rather be understood than powerful. They'll sacrifice position to be seen accurately. This is a mistake. Being misunderstood by people who don't matter is a cost of being powerful. Let them think what they want. Let them have their narrative. You don't need to correct it. You just need to refuse to live inside it. Frame control is about deciding what game is being played. Most people let others decide and then try to win the game that was chosen for them. You need to be the person who decides the game. And if you don't like the game someone is trying to play, you don't play. You reframe or you leave. There is no third option that doesn't result in you being positioned beneath someone else's reality. You give too many chances. You warn people multiple times. You explain what they did wrong. You give them opportunities to correct. You believe in growth. You believe in second chances. You believe people deserve the benefit of the doubt. This is why people keep disrespecting you. Punishment delayed is punishment negotiated. The moment you announce consequences without delivering them, you've taught someone that consequences are theoretical. The moment you give a second chance after a boundary violation, you've taught them that boundaries are flexible. Machiavelli wrote that cruelty, when necessary, should be exercised all at once. Not out of malice, out of efficiency. Because repeated small punishments create resentment without creating correction. One decisive action creates clarity. You don't need to be cruel. You need to be final. When someone crosses a line, the consequence must be immediate and proportional, not 3 warnings later, not after you've calmed down, not after you've had time to reconsider, immediately. This is how you train people what you will and will not accept, not through conversations about your boundaries, through enforcement of your boundaries. Most people do the opposite. They let things slide. They hope the person will self-correct. They don't want to be the bad guy. They don't want conflict. So they absorb disrespect, absorb violations, absorb entitlement. Then one day they snap and deliver a punishment that's wildly disproportionate to the immediate trigger because they're actually responding to 6 months of accumulated violations. This is weak leadership. This is reactive positioning. This is emotional rather than strategic. You need to become someone who enforces in real time. Someone crosses your boundary. Access reduced immediately. Someone disrespects your time. Availability withdrawn immediately. Someone takes you for granted. Investment pulled immediately. No discussion. No warning. No chance to explain. Just consequence. You'll notice most people recalibrate instantly because they just learned that your boundaries are real. The ones who don't recalibrate, you've just identified people who don't respect structure. Remove them. Here's what most people are afraid of: being seen as harsh, being seen as unforgiving, being seen as cold. Good. Let them think that, because what they're actually seeing is someone who knows their value and protects it. What they're actually seeing is someone who doesn't negotiate boundaries. What they're actually seeing is someone who operates from position, not desperation. Punishment is not personal. It's structural. It's the price of violation. Make it clear. Make it certain. Make it final. Or keep wondering why people don't respect your boundaries. Most people try to demonstrate value through what they do. Competent people demonstrate value through what they won't do. You say yes too often. You take on projects that don't serve you. You accept terms that are beneath you. You work with people you don't respect. You compromise on standards because you're afraid of what saying no will cost you. It's costing you more to say yes. Every time you accept something beneath your standard, you're telling the market what you're worth. Every time you say yes to something you should refuse, you're training people that your boundaries are negotiable. Every time you take on work that doesn't align with where you're going, you're spending limited resources on unlimited mediocrity. Machiavelli advised that a ruler must know when to refuse gifts, because gifts create obligation, and obligation creates positioning. The moment you accept something you didn't want, you've given someone leverage. Watch powerful people. They refuse constantly. They refuse meetings. They refuse opportunities. They refuse partnerships. They refuse money. Not because they don't want growth, because they understand that what you refuse is what defines you. Your refusal is your brand. It tells people what you value. It tells people what you won't tolerate. It tells people what league you're playing in. Most people are afraid to refuse because they think it closes doors. It does. It closes the wrong doors. Every door you close on something beneath you is a door you've freed yourself to walk through something aligned with you. You need to start saying no without explanation. No apology. No softening. Just no. Someone offers you a collaboration that doesn't serve your positioning. No. Someone asks for your time on a project you don't care about. No. Someone wants you to compromise your standards for convenience. No. The people who respect you will respect this more. The people who don't will reveal themselves immediately by pushing back. They'll try to negotiate your no. They'll try to make you feel guilty for having boundaries. They'll try to reframe your refusal as a character flaw. Let them. You just learned who they are. Here's what happens when you become someone who refuses strategically. You become expensive. Not because you charge more, because you're selective. And selective is the same as scarce, and scarcity creates value. The person who says yes to everything is worth nothing because they have no standards. The person who says no to most things is worth everything because they've demonstrated they know what they're worth. Stop trying to be accessible. Start trying to be selective. This is the law most people will reject because it requires you to face something uncomfortable. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are a participant in your positioning. Every interaction you have is shaped by the story you tell yourself about who you are in that interaction. If you believe you're less than the person you're talking to, you will behave submissively. If you believe you're more, you will behave with authority. Your belief determines your behavior. Your behavior determines how others position you. This is the loop most people can't see because they're inside it. You think your submission is a response to how others treat you. It's not. Your submission is based on the narrative you've already accepted about yourself. You decided you were beneath them before the interaction started, and then you behaved in ways that confirmed that positioning. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold, not because the universe rewards courage, but because boldness is the external expression of internal certainty. You act with authority when you believe you deserve position. You act with deference when you believe you don't. And people respond to what you believe about yourself, not what you say about yourself. You can say you're confident while projecting submission through your posture, your tonality, your eye contact, your energy. And people will respond to the projection, not the claim. This is why affirmations don't work. You're trying to override your internal narrative with words, while your entire system is broadcasting the opposite signal. You're lying to yourself, and everyone can feel it. Here's what you need to do instead. Change the story at the identity level. You are not someone who seeks approval. You are someone whose approval is sought. You are not someone who justifies their decisions. You are someone whose decisions set precedent. You are not someone who adapts to rooms. You are someone rooms adapt to. This isn't arrogance. This is accurate positioning based on competence, scarcity, and boundary enforcement. But you have to believe it first. You have to internalize it before you can project it. And you internalize it by behaving as if it's already true until the evidence accumulates and the belief becomes automatic. This is the final law because it's the foundation of all the others. You cannot execute any of these strategies from a position of internal weakness. You cannot refuse to explain if you don't believe your decisions are valid. You cannot withdraw attention if you believe the other person is the source of value. You cannot demonstrate competence if you don't believe you're capable. Your external reality is a reflection of your internal narrative. Change the narrative and the reality shifts. Most people wait for the reality to shift first. They wait for evidence. They wait for permission. They wait for someone else to validate their worth before they step into authority. You cannot wait. You have to move first. You have to behave as if you already have the position you're claiming. And then reality will catch up. This is the difference between servants and rulers. Servants wait to be given permission. Rulers take position and dare the world to challenge it. If you've made it this far, you've already changed. You can't unhear this. You can't return to believing that being nice is enough. You can't go back to thinking effort equals respect. You can't unsee the power dynamics in every interaction you have from now on. Some of you are angry right now. Good. That anger is the part of you that knows I'm right and hates that I'm right. That's the part of you that's been operating from weakness and calling it morality. That's the part of you that's been losing and calling it kindness. Let it die. Some of you are uncomfortable. Perfect. Discomfort is the gap between who you've been and who you're becoming. Sit in it. Most people run from discomfort back into familiar patterns of submission. You're not most people anymore. Here's what happens next. You go into the world and you test these principles, and you'll notice something immediately. They work. People recalibrate around you. People who used to dismiss you start paying attention. People who used to waste your time start valuing it. People who used to position themselves above you start treating you as an equal or repositioning beneath you. Not because you became cruel, because you became clear. You stopped negotiating your value. You stopped explaining your decisions. You stopped seeking approval from people who never deserved the authority to give it. You stopped being available to people who don't value access. And in doing that, you shifted from servant to ruler. But understand this. Most people will never make this shift. Most people will watch this video and feel briefly inspired and then return to exactly the patterns that keep them powerless. Because comfort is stronger than growth. Because familiarity is stronger than freedom. Because being liked is easier than being respected. You have to decide which side of that line you're on. This information is not for everyone. Most people don't have the stomach for it. Most people would rather be pleasant than powerful. Most people would rather be understood than positioned. If that's you, this is where we part ways. But if you're still here, if you felt something shift while you were listening, if you recognized yourself in the autopsy and you're ready to operate differently, then you've just been given the map. Now you have to walk the territory. And the territory doesn't care about your intentions, it only scores outcomes. Move accordingly.